Hi everyone. So today I wanted to talk about Cameron Green and being his replacement in the Australian 11 for the Sydney Test. So not necessarily his long-term replacement. Hopefully he's only out for one Test match. Of course, he cut his finger. Now that means that he can't bowl apparently. He can still bat. He was batting yesterday and with some discomfort. Of course, his strike rate was very, very bad, but he still managed to get a half century, which is pretty good. Maybe he should bat like that normally. I don't know. Anyway, so let's have a look at the candidates. So the first candidate that I could think of is I was thinking going back and saying, okay, if we look at who he replaced, um, I mean, I'm not even quite sure who that was. It was probably Mitchell Marsh. Of course, he was another all-rounder, sort of. I hate calling Mitchell Marsh an all-rounder. I don't really think he properly is. Mitchell Marsh is more of a bowler whose father and brother are more batsmen because his father was Jeff Marsh, an opening batsman, and his older brother, was Sean Marsh, who well he opened the batting sometimes and more in the middle order. Um, Mitchell Marsh was more of a bowler, and his batting was never at their level because he focused on bowling, and it's hard to do both to the same level. That's why all rounders are such a difficult thing to do. I mean, if you focus on batting, then you're not focusing on your bowling. If you're focusing on your bowling, then you're not focusing on your batting. So he's a bowler. Um, and, in ODIs or T20s, maybe a bit of heavy striking without quite as much technique can work. But in test matches, he's always been a major liability as a batsman. And his bowling is, look, I think he's quite a good bowler. Certainly T20 level, but he's not as good as Australia's four or five best bowlers. He's not in the top 10. He's probably quite a distance down the list. And I think Cameron Green is probably a better bowler than Mitchell Marsh. So putting Mitchell Marsh back in would feel like a step backwards. Mitchell Marsh is someone that we wanted to be an all-rounder. He wasn't an actual all-rounder. I mean, we have had proper all-rounders. We've had Steve Smith was a proper all-rounder, at least at first-class level, until we stuffed him up. Tried to make him a bowler, and then he decided to become a batsman instead. Um, there's a little period where he was meant to be this buffer. It's a little weird. I don't know what they were thinking when they thought of that. Steve O'Keefe was meant to be an all-rounder as well. Certainly was at first-class level, and then nowadays he's just a bowler. He doesn't even bother with focusing on batting. Steve Waugh, of course, was an all-rounder, but then became a batsman. Mark Waugh was an all-rounder who never completely focused on batting, but yeah, had pretty similar record to Steve Waugh. I think they looked over their career stats and they were very, 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 very similar. I think Mark Waugh did slightly better in ODIs and Steve Waugh did slightly better at tests and so forth. Um, so replacing him with an all-rounder might be difficult. So let's have a look now at who else there is that was a batsman, because what's wrong with having six batsmen and four bowlers? That's your traditional lineup. You don't always have to have an all rounder, and a lot of teams don't have that all rounder, not at test level. There's no necessity for it. So, with the strength of our bowlers, I don't think we need to have a fifth bowler. It's not really essential. It doesn't add that much. It gives them a bit of a break, and on those conditions where you need to have an extra bowler, and you could just play five bowlers. South Africa have been playing five bowlers without really a proper all rounder, and not sure it's working for them because they're losing, but it is a legitimate option. So as for the batsmen, so the last time that we needed an extra batsman, we played Usman Khawaja. He replaced Travis Head last year when Travis Head was out with that virus, and then Usman Khawaja ended up opening because he scored twin centuries um, in that test where he came in as a reserve, and then they decided to dump Marcus Harris, and Usman Khawaja became the opener, and he's been for the year since, and been one of the best openers in the world in that year. So we can't really put Usman Khawaja back in. Could we put Marcus Harris? Probably not. Um, so it's really difficult to think of that. Will Pukowski is another one, of course. Keep talking about him. He keeps getting concussed and isn't really in consideration. He's doing commentating now. I think that might mean that he might have retired. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. Um, but the one that I really want to talk about and who seems to me to be quite a long way ahead of the other competitors is Aaron Hardy. Now, Aaron Hardy, I believe, is born in England. He has a first class batting average about 46, which is above most of the other people who'd be in contention for the batting slots. So, I mean, I could have talked about Glenn Maxwell, who spin bowling all rounder of sorts, but focuses quite a lot on his batting. Although his bowling has been good in stages, certainly at T20 level, but he hasn't played a first class match I think since 2019. So and his Test record isn't that great. Um, he's been better with his bowling than his batting, and yeah, I think that it'd be tough to consider him. But Aaron Hardy is one that batting average of 46 is a long way ahead of other batsmen, even let alone that he bowls as well. And his bowling average is about 30. That's nowhere near good enough to be as a bowler, but it's good enough to be a backup bowler. And he bowls pace. So if you're thinking, oh, Steve Smith can bowl, yeah, that's spin. Um, Travis Head can bowl spin. And Travis Head thought of himself as quite a decent bowler. Um, David Warner, he's not that good a bowler, but he does enjoy himself bowling, and he's another spinner. So if you want it as a pace bowling option, because you've got Head and Smith as your backup spinners. Um, Aaron Hardy bowls pace, so the thing is, and I'm not sure if we could ever have Green and Hardy in the same side. So, assuming that Hardy does well, I don't think he's looking to be another batsman. I don't know who we'd replace, but um, we're probably more likely to replace a batsman than bowler because we don't have very many backup batsman spots. So, let's say David Warner and Usman Khawaja are both, I think they're both 36, they're both about the same age. And I think realistically one or both could leave, and that could leave an opening spot. So if Aaron Hardy does well, it'll probably just be for one match, no matter how well he does. But he could come back in as an opener later on. Or, I mean, there's talk that Travis Head could become an opener after a while. Um, and yeah, I mean, maybe it'd be Travis Head and Marcus Harris opening, or Matt Renshaw, I've heard people say should open. And maybe there'll be a spot in the middle order in Travis Head's spot. I don't know if Head prefers to open or would just be happy to do it. There is a possibility, but then we might have one too many all rounders, and we'd have to really change the lineup a fair bit to accommodate that, and that could be an issue. But I suppose, South Africa used to play two, even three all rounders in Test matches. England now are playing like four or five. Realistically, just about all their team, or certainly all their bowlers, are all rounders. Well, most of them, perhaps not all. I mean, Jack Leach doesn't bat that well, although I think he got a Test century. India have had stages where they played a lot of all rounders, even at Test level. So you can do it. And I think Aaron Hardy just, I mean, if his stats are to be believed, he's quite a good player and someone that you'd like to have. But in saying that, there was a guy called James Faulkner who played one Test and a number of ODIs before he fell out of favour. He never actually failed, but I don't know if there was just some talk that they didn't want him anymore. And in his side, for Tasmania, there was a guy called Luke Butterworth who never played for Australia. And he had quite good stats. I think he averaged about 30 and with a bat and 28 with a ball, something like that. Not amazing, but better batting average than bowling average, which is what you want in an all rounder. And James Faulkner had better record again, but you never saw Butterworth play. And I think it's a similar situation. I mean, Green and Hardy are probably better than Faulkner and Butterworth, but if you look at it, statistically speaking, Green is better than Hardy. I don't know how that'll translate, but it will feel a lot like Hardy's in Green Shadow. And they also play for the same state, and I don't think they play together very often. It's more like Hardy comes in to replace Green playing for Western Australia. And that could be an issue for Hardy. He'd be forever a backup. Similar also, if you remember, for Stuart MacGill when he was playing with Shane Warne, for both leg spinners. And MacGill mostly only came in when Warne was injured or when he got banned. Got banned a few times. And even after Warne retired, MacGill, he just couldn't do it and he retired soon after. So, yeah, there is that danger. But there is also the possibility that he could forge his own way. And I think if Hardy focused more on his batting than his bowling, he'd have more of a future because we do have quite a lot of bowling stocks. Having someone who can bowl a bit would be good, but if he can focus on his batting, we really do need some more batsmen coming through. Because after this lot, current top six, there's no reserves right now, and having him as a reserve as the seventh best, and even I know we have specialist openers Renshaw and Harris. I don't have a lot of faith in either of them, but I'd probably put Renshaw ahead of Harris. I'd certainly put Pukovsky ahead of either of them, but he's concussions issues. Yeah, to have someone like Hardy come through would be great, whichever position he ends up filling. I don't really need him to bowl that much. Just have it as a bowling option, even if his bowling's not very good. Just to give the proper bowlers a bit of a break, to give a bit of an option. Sometimes you can take wickets even if you're bowling badly. So it can be good in certain conditions. Those wickets just come, and I don't think he needs to be taking wickets. I think just having him able to bowl to a certain quality is fine. And I think the same as Green. It's fine if he doesn't take wickets, but I'd want him to focus on his batting. That'd be my focus for him. I'd say, all right, work on your batting, let your bowling slip a bit, but not too much. Don't want it to be too bad. Become a Steve Smith as a batsman, and I don't know if he's capable of that, but his record suggests, well, he's similar to Steve Smith's record at that stage of his career. Um, and yeah, I'd think you could go either way. You could become a Steve O'Keefe who focuses on his bowling, because Steve O'Keefe was a great batsman and a good all-rounder early on in his career, certainly at first class level. And Smith and O'Keefe were both very similar records. Seems really weird to say that now, but they're both spinning all-rounders, and both had very similar records. But one turned to batting, one turned to bowling. I think Hardy, if he turns to bowling, he'll be like Mitchell Marsh, and it'll be hard to find a place for him out in the Test level at least. But if he focuses on his batting, I think there's a big future there, and it'd be really interesting to see him how he goes in a one-off test. It might be his only test for a number of years even, but if he does well enough, they might put him into the ODI or T20 sides. I think ODI we have a bigger gap than we do for T20s. Our T20 side's quite decent. Um, and he could be someone that we'll be thinking of for a while. If he fails, I'm sure he'll get another opportunity later on, as long as he keeps performing. But he'd be wanting to do well. It'd be difficult. Green's just got a 50 and a 5 wicket innings in the same match. It's hard to follow in that shadow, but even if he got 1 or 2 wickets, just 1 wicket would be fine. And, 20 or 30 runs, I think that would be enough to get people thinking about him. And he just really needs to look good more than get runs or get wickets. He just needs to look like someone who belongs at that level. That's it from me. Bye bye now.